Shalom. Today we are in the Torah portion Pinchas. You may have heard it referred to as Pinchas or also Phineas, the English version of the name. And really the story for this Torah portion started last week at the end of the portion when Pinchas killed the Israelite who had brought the Midianite woman in front of the tabernacle to fornicate with her, essentially. And so what we have at the beginning of this portion is the covenant that Yahweh makes with Phineas for being jealous for Yahweh or passionate for Yahweh. This phrase has been translated a couple different ways. We're going to talk about that in a second, but first, as usual, I just want to look at the names because, as usual, we have genealogy here. We have Phineas, son of so-and-so of so-and-so, and the same with the person who was killed, as well as the woman that he was committing adultery with. So Phineas's name means mouth of brass, and he's son of Eleazar, the priest, of course, who is the son of Aaron. So he directly descends from that priestly line. And Eleazar means God has helped, and Aaron means light bringer. Now, in chapter 25, verse 11, it says, Phineas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, has turned back my wrath from the Israelites by displaying among them his passion for me, so that I did not wipe out the Israelite people in my passion. Now, us English-speaking people living in Western nations probably understand this to be, oh, he loved God so much, he's so passionate for him. We might imagine him as being one of those people who really get into the worship services, singing, arms raised to the sky. And that's great, and none of that is bad. But that's not really what that word here means, or what that thought is in Hebrew Eastern culture versus modern Western culture. If you look at the word there, the meaning of it means, and it has negative meaning, right? Jealous, envious of, or exciting to jealous anger. So how do we reconcile the meaning of this word with the good thing that Phineas did? And definitely he was excited to anger because he killed. What had the person he killed been doing? He was defiling God's house, and he was raising himself up above God. Phineas felt a jealousy for his God in the face of this person who was trying to usurp or take God's place or take what didn't belong to him. He felt that jealousy, and that's what excited him to a fit of jealous anger. And he ended up killing the guy and the woman that he was committing adultery with. Now, the person he killed, the guy's name is Zimri, which means my music. He is son of Salu, which means Wade. And Salu was a prince of the Simeonites, and Simeon means herd. Now, the woman he was fornicating with, her name is Cosby, which means my lie. Lie as in dishonesty, not lie as in lie down. She was daughter of Zur, which means rock. And he, too, was the head over an ancestral house in Midian. So these are children of royalty, if you'll have it that way. And maybe that's why they presume to do their thing in front of the tabernacle rather than going to their own tent. They felt entitled to some status, some stature. And this then makes it make even more sense, that meaning of the Hebrew word that has been translated here as jealous, or in my translation as passion. So just something to think on. Now, in Numbers chapter 26, we get a change of tone, and we have a census again. So there's a lot of counting, a lot of names, and a lot of numbers. But we had a census earlier this year. And what's very interesting about this one is that it so brings back to what Yahweh had said when the Israelites wouldn't stop complaining and they wished that they had died in the wilderness. And he said, well, fine, you're getting what you asked for. So in chapter 26, verse 64, after the census says, among these there was not one of those enrolled by Moses and Aaron the priests when they recorded the Israelites in the wilderness of Sinai. So this is exactly what he said, and that's exactly what happened. Now Aaron has already died, and Moshe will soon die, so neither of those two will enter. Now, he does make the exception here. In verse 65, Yahweh said, "They shall die in the wilderness." Not one of them survived except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, son of Nun. They were the two that were trying to rouse up the Israelites to go into the land, to not be afraid of the people that were there. They were excited about it, and they wanted to essentially get their inheritance, which Yahweh had promised to them. And as we'll see, it's going to be Joshua, son of Nun, that does lead the Israelite people into the land, since Moshe cannot. Later in this Torah portion, he actually is anointed and is given his status as the new leader of the Israelite people. And kind of along those lines, in 27 verse 21, it's already been decided. Actually, in verse 18, it says, Yahweh answered Moshe, "Single out Joshua, son of Nun, an inspired man, and lay your hand upon him. Have him stand before Eleazar the priest and before the whole community, and commission him in their sight. Invest him with some of your authority, so that the whole Israelite community may obey. But he shall present himself to Eleazar the priest, who shall on his behalf seek the decision of the Urim before Yahweh." So Yahweh's saying it, but it's like this extra layer of confirmation that Joshua is the one to do it, by the priest officially going and asking the Urim, which means lights, shining light on Yahweh's chosen one. And of course, I think we all know that Joshua is a foreshadowing and parallel to Messiah. And so there's going to be a lot of pretty exciting Torah portions coming up soon, I think. Now, I found something very interesting in what could otherwise be considered a boring passage, because it's a lot of the same verbiage and stuff over and over again. It's talking about the different sacrifices that Israelites are supposed to make, the daily sacrifices, the sacrifices on Sabbath, the sacrifices around feast days. But I had a thought, and I'm really glad I had this thought, because I found something very interesting. We're talking about the fall feast days, and there are a couple that happen in the 7th month. There's the Feast of Atonement, and there is Sukkot. So these are the fall feasts. Keeping in mind that Yeshua has already fulfilled the spring feasts, and the expectation is that he will return during the fall feasts. Now, the 7th month, why is this significant? The 7th letter in the Hebrew alphabet is Zayin. It's the crowned Vav, and the Jewish sages say it represents returning light. It also carries meanings of weapon and sword, with the root word meaning sustenance and nourishment. This is all Yeshua right here. So, if it represents returning light, and it is the crowned Vav, Yeshua is going to be crowned. He received his crown of thorns when he was killed. The Vav often represents the nail, and it was the nail that held him to the stake, the execution stake. He had his crown of thorns. He will come back to get his true crown. And he is the light, and he's returning. It'll be a second coming. And so I find it quite interesting that this connotation is held in the number 7 in the Hebrew letter. That is the symbol of the number 7. In Hebrew, there aren't numbers per se, like we're used to Arabic numerals. They count with the Hebrew letters. And Yeshua is returning during the fall feasts, and here it is, the 7th month. He also brings a sword with him and weapon. He fights. He's a warrior, not just a peaceful lamb like people often think, because he will fight for his people and he will ultimately be victorious. Along the same lines, he provides sustenance to us and nourishes us. So in all those meanings and connotations that the Hebrew letter Zayin has, we see Yeshua in the 7th month. Now on the 10th day, this is the first feast. This is when we are to deny ourselves. This is atonement. And the 10th letter in Hebrew is Yod. And Yod is just a tiny little tick, and so thus it's said to be part of every Hebrew letter. and therefore makes up everything. And because of this, it is seen by the sages as the divine point of energy. It depicts the geometry of creation. What's interesting is that on atonement, because of what the sacrifice does for us, we begin to become a new creation on atonement. That's the beginning of our rebirth. That's the cleansing every year so that we can start over. Yeshua was our atonement. It was his sacrifice that enabled us to move beyond the flesh and live in the spirit, because the flesh can never be perfect. It can never be righteous. It can never obey Torah. We can only do it if we have his spirit in us. And that's why he said he will write his Torah on our hearts. And the gift of the spirit that comes through Yeshua is what enables us to keep Torah. And so here it is in 10, the Day of Atonement. It's also a picture of humility. We can never receive the Spirit if we don't humble ourselves before him. So there's a very good lesson in there as well. On the 15th day of the month, this is when Sukkot begins. This is the Feast of Tabernacles. When Israel was going through the wilderness, this is exactly what they were doing. They were tabernacling with Yahweh. They were learning that they needed to rely on him, that he was their protector, that he would fight for them. There was nothing they had to do. All they had to do was trust him and let him go to battle for them, and they would become victorious. Because they didn't have that faith, they were stuck in the wilderness 40 more years than they had to be. The 15th letter in the Hebrew alphabet is Samech, and it means lean upon, uphold, and support. So exactly everything that the Israelites need to learn by being in the wilderness, leaning upon Yahweh. He upholds them. He supports them. The root of the word is in Samicha, which means laying of hands on in sacrifice. And it's the letter used to spell Sukkah, which is the tents that the Israelites stay in every year during Sukkot, to be reminiscent of the tents that they stayed in the wilderness. They stayed in Sukkah. It's to teach people that God is our support and shelter. We are passive in this, say the sages. He is the active one and we're passive. We just need to have faith and trust and allow him to be our support and shelter. Now, what's very interesting about this feast day is that it's an 8-day feast. The 8th day is the last day. And if you count 8 from 15, you get 22. And there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, the last letter being Tav, which means truth. And Yeshua is truth. He's the Aleph and the Tav, as he said. So again, it all wraps up and it points to Yeshua. And I think what we learn here, just from looking at the numbers and the gematria and the meaning of the Hebrew letters for these fall feasts, to me just solidified to me the fact that Yeshua is coming for the fall feasts, because it will perfectly fulfill everything here. And it's on the 8th day when everything is made new and finally everything is complete. A lot of people would say, well, nobody knows the day. That's what scripture says. But he does say we are to watch. And so if we couldn't have an idea of when it could be, what would we be watching out for? These are the kind of things that we need to watch for. Okay, we may not know the exact day. Is it going to happen this year? Is it going to happen next year? Don't know. When the day comes, when? Midnight? 2 in the afternoon? Don't know. That's why you need to be ready. But it doesn't mean you're in complete darkness and that you're completely unexpecting it. We should expect it. How else can we be ready? And right now, more than ever, in today's world, I think we need to be ready. And so especially keep an eye out in fall time and in the events leading up to fall time. Watch Israel. That's the center of everything. See what's happening over there and pay extra close attention in these months leading up to the fall feast and what's happening around that time. And pray and be steadfast and make sure that you're ready. So, as you can see, the end is told from the beginning. And once again in Torah, we see connotations and foreshadowings and prophecies and direction and patterns that we can look to in the end of days. So I hope you enjoyed this Torah portion, and as usual, feel free to make comments, share with me your own thoughts and revelations. We can chat, discuss, have a midrash. Love to hear what you're learning as well. Shabbat Shalom.